The plenary session on day 2 of the conference focused specifically on the host city Mumbai and the considerable challenges it faces. We first heard of the plans underway in the city from the Commissioner of the Mumbai Metropolitan Region Development Authority before hearing from the Remaking of Mumbai Federation on their challenges for the C Ward district. Finally, Ctbuh Executive Director Antony Wood presented a hypothetical project for the C Ward which has been created with his students from the Illinois Institute of Technology.
MMRD is one of the organizations dealing with infrastructure in Mumbai, and in collaboration with World Bank and Lee Associates, we have prepared a comprehensive plan for the holistic development of Mumbai Metropolitan Region. One component of that plan is comprehensive transport study, and the other is business plan, which we have prepared, envisages investment to the tune of $60 billion in transport, water supply, drainage, solid waste management, power sector, water supply, etc. So it's a huge program which MMRDA has put before it. And there are so many agencies, including urban local bodies like Mumbai Corporation and other 7 corporations, 13 other urban local bodies. They are all supposed to get involved in that. Now, to build up infrastructure to the tune of $60 billion is, of course, a massive task. And I'm happy to mention, for your information, that in our business plan, what we have anticipated is 40% of this investment is supposed to come through public-private partnership. Many people feel that the business plan which we have prepared is little inflated. How can it happen that you invest $60 billion, 2,60,000 crores, okay, and that too almost $20 billion before 2014? Next 5 years, we are supposed to invest in Mumbai, my organization alone, about $20 billion, out of which the projects which have already been started recently are to the tune of about $5 to $6 billion. So I would like to assure you that the plan which we have prepared is not over-ambitious. It's the other way around. I personally feel that whatever infrastructure we have planned to be put in place by 2031 should be done much ahead of that, considering tremendous pressure of population, migration. The rate of growth of population, for your information, in MMR, in certain pockets like Mira Bhayandar, New Bombay, is about 15% per year. So this is the rate of growth in MMR, and one has to respond to this urbanization by building up infrastructure, and that too very fast. So the first challenge which we have taken up before ourselves is metro rail. So we have planned metro rail to the tune of 450 kilometers to be put in place by 2031. The second thing which we have done, our organization has done, is monorail. We don't have monorail in the country. We hope to put in place monorail length of 250 kilometers. So lots of things have been planned, and I can assure you that things will be in place. There are tremendous opportunities for investors to join hands with us in the form of PPP in various sectors and areas.
If the city of Mumbai is to remake an integrated development plan of Mumbai is to be prepared in advance, which is the topic of discussion for this session. ROMF has put up a concept composite solution to government, leading to a holistic integrated planning of Mumbai city and its practical and successful implementation. The experience in last 3 to 4 decades shows that all respective departments in the government and in civic body of Mumbai as regards planning and execution of city developments are not moving in tandem with expertise, and hence all related activities have progressed in isolated manner, and the growth have occurred in unplanned, incremental and haphazard manner, led to a disastrous situation. The concept of solution as suggested by ROMF involves the sectorial planning of the whole city by a city planning and monitoring company, CPMC. A body is to be formed. CPMC formed and working under corporate governance on PPP, public-private partnership basis. The whole city area may be divided into hundreds of sectors, each of round about 50 to 60 acres, and a detailed sectorial urban and infrastructural planning should be done in a continuity, and then sector by sector development, SSDS, should be done. The whole essence of ROMF suggestion is CPMC, City Planning and Monitoring Company, for planning and integrated planning of the whole city of Mumbai, and then SSDS, sector by sector development of the same. A typical presentation of South Mumbai, how it could be transformed into a world-class city, is made and will be shown by our Federation Secretary Mayank Gandhi.
Good morning. This is a festering wound in the heart of the city which no one has looked at. It is the inner city. There are 500,000 families, 2.5 million people living in over 30,000 buildings. These are buildings which have been made pre-1940 by the British, then very precocious conditions. The infrastructure there is very poor. And because of certain archaic laws, the Rent Control Act, for example, these were never redeveloped because there were no incentive for the landlords to redevelop. There was no incentive for the landlord to actually repair it, and which is why the dilapidation is getting into worse condition. So the government in the last year or so has come out with some very good policies. There have been 2 models. The first model is redevelopment of individual buildings. So old buildings have been given certain incentives on a public-private partnership so that developers can develop that. And due to that, a lot of old buildings have been redeveloped into single towers. I believe that this solution is probably worse than the problem. So Remaking of Mumbai has been working closely with the government to change the model of redevelopment. The government has been very forthright, and the 2007 housing policy has taken care of this redevelopment on a cluster basis. And it says that MHADA, along with tenants, landlords, private developers, come together on a PPP basis for redeveloping on a cluster basis. What it really means is that you take about 100, 200, 500 buildings together, redevelop that entire neighborhood or precinct or cluster, and then augment and increase the infrastructure. Now this, for example, is one of the models that we are working on. What it would do is it would upgrade and augment the infrastructure. The tenants, the developers would be given a certain amount of corpus fund, the interest of which will take care of the lifetime maintenance for the existing people there. These people will be rehoused in a temporary accommodation, given guarantees that they will be back in a certain time frame, And when the new buildings are built, they will be brought back there. It's an inclusive approach because we are trying to bring the community together, bring them into this entire process. Restore the heritage and the religious building which are there. Not just restore them, augment it. Now this is Mumbai. We have mapped all the buildings of Mumbai. This is the inner city where over 50% or more are these old buildings. Now this is some of the towers. See, this is built, and these are the suburban rail. And if you divide this into sectors with arterial and subarterial roads, according to us, you would get about 100 clusters of 70 acres. Now, if you were to do smaller ones, 30, some bigger, then you may end up with about 150 to 200 clusters. Now so 16,500 acres of the island city where these buildings are, we need to make these 70 clusters of 100 clusters of 70, where majority of the buildings are old and dilapidated, surrounded by arterial, subarterial road. The trunk infrastructure needs to be maintained. And restoration of religious. But what really, the call that I make to the decision makers here is, unless you stop the individual redevelopment, this is never going to happen. Because in a cluster, once you start having all these tall towers which are going to come up, then there is no hope for cluster redevelopment. Already a lot of permissions have been given for individual buildings, but the government has to take some strong decisions. And there are places beyond these clusters where individual buildings can be developed. But within these clusters, you need to stop redevelopment on an individual basis. Else, once these new buildings are made, for the next 100 years, you are not going to be able to do anything. And while we are redeveloping, we need to build the sustainable processes of economic, ecological, and social components. My suggestion is that we take the best global practices, marry it with the Indian knowledge system, and with a democratic decision making, create a unique city, a unique world-class Mumbai.
Okay, good morning, everybody. The project I'm about to show is the result of myself and 12 students spending 2 weeks in the city this time last year, working together with the Remaking of Mumbai Federation. Wow. That's what we created. Is it a monster? Perhaps. So, the first thing that we struggled with when we got into the C ward was, is this area really suitable for tall buildings at all? And the first thing we grappled with was what to do at the ground plane. And so we did a number of generic studies to show how we could keep that and still perhaps develop a tall building and still put some car parking in. And I'm not going to go through it in detail, but you can perhaps get an idea through some of these. Every scheme is retaining the perimeter of the site, or at least the concept of the perimeter of the site. Okay, so this is interesting. So we did all this, we got back to Chicago, and then it was right guys, you're all ready to design your tall building. Get on with it. And look what they created. And I think this epitomizes what's kind of wrong with architecture. Each student went out and designed their own high-rise icon and created a zoo, an architectural zoo, a menagerie that had even the brief, required a vision together, and it did not have that vision. So we stepped back from that. We stepped back and we started to develop a common architectural framework, started to explore how these buildings could relate to each other, and you can see a development here. eventually to this. And this was an interesting breakthrough. In this scheme here, we started to look at the relationship between the towers at the base, at the urban grain, but also slipping past each other for views and wind and access to other things. And then this tower, you can see what we tried to do here was, as a concept, was bring the scale of the city block, the scale of the seaward into each horizon of the building, just as a concept. You can see that there. Villages, horizon villages. And then we started to superimpose on this what I call agenda. This is the final model, but I want to talk a little bit about agenda. So there were 5 towers. Each of these 5 towers had an agenda. This one was about, and most of them were sensible residential towers, but had these additional agendas. This was about food. And the students went away and did research of, as the city intensifies, as it gets bigger, we rely on ever more agricultural land to support, our existence in cities. Not only that, but then we import food and the consequential food miles and the energy involved in food miles from all around the world. They did a study which showed that a cabbage comes from Pune, 119 miles away, but an apple comes from the USA, I can't read it, 19,000 miles away. So energy implications, loss of agricultural land. And so they developed this system of, not developed, it's been done around the world, but looked at hydroponics. You don't want soil in tall buildings. Hydroponics, growing vegetables in the building. So this became a sensible residential building, but the people who live there actually have access to a high-rise allotment, a place to grow vegetables, not only to sustain themselves, but actually as a business to sell back to the city. That was one layer. So you can see at the bottom end here, this was the vertical farm element, which was broken into horizons. Fish farming, various other things up there. And then in addition to that, we had these gardens, these communal spaces up in the air. And this public green elevator. You're going to hear Ken Yang talk tomorrow about his work. And a lot of Ken Yang's work is about continual greenery. Continual greenery for eco-corridors that have taken people up to this great park in the sky. Second scheme. Some of the students really engaged with the issue of waste in Mumbai, a major problem. Waste in a large part of the seaward is just thrown out of the window. Just thrown out of the window. However, but there's a whole industry that's built up around, and we were in Dharavi slum the other day, and there's a whole section of Dharavi that is just concentrated to recycling of materials. There is an industry that has grown up around it. So these students did lots of studies and looked to incorporate that waste into their building. So again, in the same way that we have the vertical farm community for the residents that live there, here we had a kind of recycling waste center within not only that building, but the whole complex that was created. And then using some of those materials, so the building actually had a skin of bamboo on the outside, sliding bamboo. Recycled materials. I'm speeding up because I'm going to get the bell in a minute. Education. If we're going to create cities in the sky, then all aspects of the cities need to go up there. Residential, office, hotel. I just described 99% of tall buildings. Why is that? That's not a true vibrant city. So this tower actually was a residential tower and also a school. Lack of school facilities in the seaward. And to the north there, you can see the residential part, and then this was a school based around these 3-4-story atrium. Basketball court. Water tower, which looked to not only water as a resource, a valuable resource, but also the Indian culture of bathing and the importance of water in the psyche of the nation. And I'm speeding up because I want to show you this last one, which was my favorite. The Swadeshi Tower. And these guys went and spent some time in the Dhobi Ghats. For people overseas, the Dhobi Ghats are huge areas where I think something like 90% of the clothes and fabric in Mumbai is laundered through these communal clothes areas. Well, do we knock all this down? If we knock all this down, then everybody just gets a washing machine and everybody's happy. But is that the right way for India? So these students look to create this in the sky. Ringing bell. Whose idea was that? Whose idea was the bell? And also the very Asian. You go to Hong Kong and sometimes you think the towers are made of clothes because everyone's drying their clothes outside there. Is that such a bad thing? No. Conceptual image. And this was a fantastic scheme, really, which looked to embrace that, not only for the inhabitants, but as a business. As a business. You know, Charles Correa said, or somebody said yesterday, you put someone on the second floor of a high-rise building, you kill them. If they have a little business at the ground floor, you put them on the second floor, not the 82nd, you put them on the second floor, you kill them. So how can we get the business and everything else up in the sky? So that's what that scheme was doing. And there was lots of other great things going on, which I haven't got time to tell you about. Some of the spaces that we created, the residential planning, all naturally ventilated. The Dobie Ghats, the communal Dobie Ghats, which spread out along the Skybridge routes. And then the Skybridges themselves work with this idea of yatra, of procession in India. And these students studied all the different festivals, and I almost finished. So this was what we created in the end. And then this fantastic park in the sky.
How can a young, enthusiastic individual like me, who is trying to do something in Bombay, join hands with ROMF to do something or to make a change?
That's a very good question. Remaking of Mumbai Federation has always thought of people as the fulcrum which is going to make the change. We already have 13,000 members. We have some of the best brains, great people like Justice Bhagwati, Mr. Narayan Murthy, Mr. Girish Gokhale, ex-municipal commissioner. We would welcome you to come. Our purpose is to get all the people of the city who are living affected people to become part of ROMF so that it becomes a powerful force to make, because small incremental changes are not going to change this nation anymore. We are too deep in a rut. We'll have to make some firm, decisive moves. And we need the power of the people. If they say in China it happens, or it happens in a totalitarian country, because there is a political will, in India it is the people's will which will create the political will. So I would welcome all of you to please join us and create this will which will change this nation.